Thank you everyone who's already signed in. We're going to give others about another minute or so before we begin. All right, welcome everyone. Just some quick housekeeping before we begin. Please know that this webinar is being recorded and it will be available at Farrow Marine Life Center's YouTube channel for later review. It will take about a week before the recording becomes available. There will be about 15 minutes for questions at the end of this presentation. To submit questions, please use the Q&A box that's located in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Questions may be submitted at any time during this presentation. I'm Rachel Brown, the Education Manager at Farrow Marine Life Center. Farrow Marine Life Center, located in Port Angeles, Washington, is a community aquarium that was founded in 1981 by a community leader and educator, Arthur D. Farrow. We are committed to education and specialize in local marine invertebrates and fish. Thank you for participating in National Drive Electric Week and for joining us today. This is the first program in our 2021-2022 Climate Impacts and Resilience themed speaker series. Today's presentation is sponsored by Steve Methner, a State Farm Insurance agent here in Port Angeles, Washington. Today's speaker is Sean Farrar. Currently, Sean is a helicopter mechanic and a crew chief with the U.S. Coast Guard and an avid car enthusiast. Sean grew up in suburban New England, playing with lawn and garden tractors and helping his father run an auto repair shop from an early age. Sean attended a STEAM-focused high school where his love for all things mechanical was solidified. Sean joined the Coast Guard in 2003, maintaining and operating small boats on the weekend as a machinery technician, while working full-time in a New Holland Agricultural dealership. He was the lead road service technician and one of 2 CDL drivers during delivering new machines and recovering broken machines for service. Having held a Class A CDL for over 20 years and completing 3 cross-country moves with the Coast Guard, he has driven many miles in a variety of vehicles. In his free time, Sean enjoys backcountry camping and taking yet more cross-country trips in his 1999 Jeep Wrangler. Always looking for the next new and exciting technology in the mechanical world, Sean found EV to be the best choice to replace his smart car when the time came. He came to learn that the high efficiency and lower cost of maintenance was just the beginning of the benefits of switching to an EV as his primary vehicle. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Sean Farrar.
Thank you, Rachel. Let's get the screen share going here, and then I will get things going. All right, everybody should be able to see that now. So thank you for the introduction, and thank you, Farrow, for asking me to be part of the fall speaker series. I'm excited to talk about my experiences owning a short-range EV, and I'll try not to ramble on too much. I do have one piece of business before we start regarding my employer. The opinions and statements I'll make today are mine and mine alone. I'm not representing the U.S. Coast Guard or the federal government in any way. I'm just a gearhead here talking about EVs. In this talk, I'll start telling you a little bit more about myself and my background with cars, as well as cover basic EV nomenclature, charging and plug types. I'll talk about a few of my observations owning and driving an EV in general. Next, we'll talk about some of the environmental benefits and the reduced cost of ownership of an EV. I'll also touch on some of the key reasons that led me to choose the i3 over other options on the market at the time. Finally, I'll show you the tools I used to plan my 2,800-mile road trip from Detroit, Michigan to Port Angeles, Washington. And I'll talk about a few of my experiences along that trip. Excuse me. So let's fire up the Wayback Machine so you can understand a little bit of where my love of cars came from. This is me at about 7 years old on a Simplicity tractor, which I added a siren to and a bunch of little tips and other non-standard options. This yard man here, I could make that thing do wheelies on command once I had modified it a little bit more. So I've just been hot rodding cars from an early age. I've owned a bunch of different vehicles, including a smart car, as Rachel mentioned, and a first generation Honda Insight. That car got an incredible 70 miles per gallon, and it was the first car that I did a high voltage battery swap on. I actually had that i3 before I got the Insight. The Insight was a bit of a rescue case, kind of fell into it, and I'm glad to talk more about that later on. Let's get into the basics of EVs. You've probably heard and seen some of these acronyms. They can be super confusing. HEVs, or hybrid electric vehicles, they use gas only as their only fuel. They cannot be charged from the grid. The battery only charges when you are coasting or regen braking. The electric battery and motor on these type of vehicles is only used for torque fill between shifts or when the gas motor is not enough to power the vehicle for whatever you're doing. These are your early Priuses. Most Hondas are still considered HEVs. And again, they can't drive on electric mode only. Plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, or PHEVs as they're called, they allow the battery to be charged directly from the grid. Generally, they allow for an electric-only drive mode where the engine's not running at all. These are your Chrysler Pacificas, Chevy Volts, among others. There are more and more PHEVs coming on the market all the time. And as I said before, they can be plugged into the grid, into your normal house outlet, and charge the battery by itself. These will cover most Americans and most people's daily drive commutes, averaging between 30 and 40 miles on battery only. They're very attractive options for folks that need to regularly exceed the distance of their battery electric vehicles. Battery electric vehicle is battery only, as you might imagine. And the last acronym on here is ICE, which I'll say a lot tonight, just out of habit. Internal combustion engine. These are your fossil cars. This is the diesel and gas, what we all know and love. So battery electric vehicles, as I said, can only be charged from the grid. They can be charged with a standard wall outlet here. They can be charged, normally called level 1 for 120 volt outlet at home. They also can be charged at what's called level 2 charging. Level 2 charging is 240 volts. These are typically your public charging stations. Most PlugShare, anyone that you're going to see in town will most likely be a level 2. Level 3, or DC fast, this is the non-Tesla equivalent to a supercharger. So it's DC charging the battery directly. These mileage figures you see at the bottom here are average. Your results will probably vary from these figures. Depends a lot on the power of the outlet, depends on the efficiency of the vehicle, the temperature of the outside air, etc. And whether or not, again, what current is available. and what your car is actually capable of doing as well. For level 1 and level 2, the charger is actually on board with the vehicle. It's not actually the thing you're plugging into. So these are the different types of plugs that are available worldwide. Here in the US, we have J1772 and CCS1. You'll notice that the J1772 is combined into the CCS1s for DC and North America. We also have Tesla. Tesla is unique in that they have combined these AC and DC outlets, or plugs and wires rather, into a single plug. So they have a one-stop shopping for DC and AC charging. We also do have Chatimo, which is currently only used by the Nissan Leaf. Chatimo, much like Betamax, has some benefits, but it's losing the format war. Even Nissan has announced that they're going to be switching to the CCS1 for the Aria, which is their next soon-to-come electric offering. In the EU, they have Type 2, and then China has GBT. And so those are the different options and plugs that you'll see out in the world. Small stuff I didn't expect. It's very quiet on the road. I've driven a lot of vehicles, as you've probably seen and heard, and as I've told you in this presentation so far, but I really didn't expect it to be quite as quiet as it is. Conversations, even with the backseat passengers, are just as if you're sitting in your living room. The instant torque of an EV absolutely has to be experienced to understand. It's one thing to say intellectually, oh, it's instant torque. I've driven cars with lots of power. I know what that means. I thought that too. It's really hard to explain and really just does need to be experienced. Fueling your car becomes like your cell phone. I don't charge my car every day, but the amount of time it takes me to physically charge it is about 30 seconds. You get home, you plug it in, you wake up to a full battery. That sounds like a small change, but it makes a big difference in your day-to-day life and how much time you spend out of your day maintaining and fueling your vehicle. With the i3, BMW recommends you just plug it in and leave it plugged in, leave it at 100% until you drive it again. That's counter to some battery experts out there and what they say about how to best maintain a lithium battery. And you'll have to look at your own manufacturer's recommendations to decide that. Different manufacturers have different strategies to how they manage the battery and whether they allow you to actually use the full net battery and charge to a physical 100% of the battery or not. BMW doesn't do that. They show you 100%, say this is 100% of your battery, and they mean usable. So the battery is well maintained and well protected by BMW's software on board the car. 2 slides, bonus. So how green are EVs really? One of the reasons we wanted to go to EVs was to an EV for our primary commuter car and grocery getter was the environmental impact. In this slide here, this is from the US Department of Energy. I believe Rachel will have some of these links for you if you guys want to look at this stuff yourself. But the national grid makeup is here. This is the national average. And you can see that the EV emits far less emissions per year than the other cars. And what about Washington? You can see here, this is Washington's. So in Washington, we have a lot of hydroelectric. Hydroelectric is obviously very low emissions. And that further increases the difference between your standard gasoline car, the HEVs, the FEVs versus the electric. So that's great. That's tailpipe emissions. What about the emissions from making the car and the battery? Aren't batteries bad for the environment? Well, the answer is yes, they are. They do require quite a bit of carbon and quite a bit of emissions to be built in the first place. This graph here is a screenshot from the Engineering Explained's YouTube channel. Where if you're not familiar with Engineering Explained, he's an actual engineer and does all of his math longhand on a whiteboard. So you can see for yourself exactly what he's doing and the conclusions that he comes to. This video directly addresses the extra battery production carbon emissions. So you'll see here, this is the national average of an ICE car. And 2 years of driving of tailpipe emissions, 6 years of driving of tailpipe emissions. Idaho is where the Engineering Explained comes from. So this is his grid makeup. And you'll see that with a 30 kilowatt battery powered EV, it will take him a little over 1 year to offset the extra emissions from the construction of the battery. And the US average is about 3.6 years. The bigger battery pack takes a little longer, as you might expect. What about if we are in a coal country or a state that uses not as much hydro or doesn't have a grid the same as Idaho? this is West Virginia. So we kind of have the hydropowered side of the country and the coal-powered side of the country. And you can see the numbers extrapolate pretty well, and that you still will end up breaking even, or I should say offsetting that carbon and those emissions from building the battery. Now, it does get a little tricky. If you are in West Virginia and you're driving a car with a large battery, it will take you much longer to offset that. So you can see 17.8 years. Again, this is him using the national average of ICE cars. So if your vehicle gets more or less miles per gallon, you could do better or worse than this. You'll have to decide for yourself whether or not it's worth it. So what about here in Port Angeles? Well, this site here, this evolution.es.acronyms and website stuff is I got to this website and this calculator from the Department of Energy. And it's a real-time, unique case study where you can put in whichever vehicles you want. These are the three I picked to kind of be as close as possible on MSRP, and they all seat 5 people. They're all, with the exception of the Mini, they're all front-wheel drive. I wanted to say as close as possible, as close to comparable as possible. And again, you can put in your own figures here. So I ran this model with the national average yearly mileage, which is 13,005 and a repeating number, 2.53, $2.53 per gallon of gas, which comes out to 37 miles per day. I did this for 50% highway and 50% city. And I figured about 700 miles worth of road trips. That's a trip to the east side of the Cascades to see family twice a year. And you can see that we're saving $11,900 in fuel alone. That more than offsets the $13,000 difference in the MSRP between the Kona and the Chevy Equinox. And you will break even just on the MSRP at 1.14 years. And that's just with fuel savings. That's not putting gas in the car. That doesn't count for EV maintenance, which is less versus gas maintenance, oil changes and things like that you do not incur with a battery electric vehicle. So what's been my cost of ownership? That leads into a good question with the i3, right? With my 3 years now, almost 4, I've spent a total of $206, which does not include a unplanned $190 stop when I smashed a pothole and had to get all 4 tires balanced. So that's $20 a year in cabin air filters and a set of wiper blades at $70 because BMW wiper blades are expensive. I'm sure you can get wiper blades for your car or whatever car you end up getting at far less than that. But sometimes that's what happens when you have a BMW. And even by now, there are aftermarket options available for the BMW as well. At the time, I had to stick with the dealership. So that's part of why I wanted an electric vehicle. So why did I pick the i3 over other ones? Things are certainly different in the EV market today than they were in 2018. Efficiency was still a big factor for us. And you can see that even in 2020, the BMW i3 does very well and is in the top 10 of electric vehicles currently on the market. We opted not to get the Rex on the car because, again, we wanted to avoid that maintenance costs. And it felt like cheating if we had an EV that also was a gas car. And the i3 more than met our daily mileage range. And so we took a bit of a gamble not getting the Rex, and we're hoping and expecting the DC fast charging network to expand, which it really has. At the time, the i3 also was one of only 2 that qualify for the $7,500 federal tax credit. So these were all some of the factors that led us to the i3, as well as having a national dealership network that is more traditional and more in line with my intent to work on this car long term and to be able to buy parts for it across the counter. Other factors that led us to the i3 were the green tech and minimal carbon emissions throughout the construction. The body is carbon fiber reinforced plastic. The trimming from pressing and forming and curing these panels, any trim off from them gets laid up crosshatch wise and forms the roof panel, which then becomes part of primary structure because it is so strong. So that's a waste saving technique that they baked directly into the production. Interior panels are largely made of kenaf fiber and wool. Kenaf it's a hemp-like plant, grows much like hemp and is formed with resin to become the interior panels that are traditionally plastic in a lot of other vehicles. The Leipzig, Germany factory is carbon neutral. Back in 2013, there were only a few. Subaru was one of the only other manufacturers that had a full carbon neutral factory producing vehicles. So the Leipzig, Germany factory is where the i3 and the i8 were built. Another factor for us in picking the i3 was how effective it is at DC fast charging. So DC fast charging is limited by the car's equipment, the current capacity of the charger that you're going to, and ambient temperature actually plays a large role, as well as battery temperature. And you can see in this graph here with looking at the Nissan Leaf that at first the battery takes a lot of current very quickly. This is the 40 kilowatt line here up to 45, and it drops off at a certain point. So depending on the size of the battery, it may drop off earlier or it may drop off later. You can see the largest Nissan Leaf battery drops off at a little past 60%, and the medium Leaf battery drops off at about 45 at its max charging current at about 80%. So think of it like filling up a 5-gallon bucket. At first, you can have the hose ripping full bore and it's filling in there. As the bucket gets higher, you have to kind of reduce that flow, otherwise you'll overflow the bucket. It's a rough analogy, but that's pretty close to what you're looking at with DC charging. So looking at the i3's charge curve, you can see it has a lot of area below the curve. It does really well. It stays up near its maximum charge range, all the way into the 80% range. And this is what I saw real world driving cross country, charging 5 to 6 times a day on my road trip from Detroit to Port Angeles. The car performed absolutely flawlessly. The i3 has active thermal management to make sure that the battery doesn't overheat and stays right in its sweet spot, and will routinely and repeatably charge at its max charge speed. So max charge speed has kind of become a little bit of a numbers race. And in some cases, that's a very poor metric for how capable the car actually is on a road trip, especially when back-to-back fast charging. A more useful metric would be how long does it take to get from 20% to 80%? That's where the i3 really shines. From 20 to 80% only takes this car between 15 and 30 minutes, depending on ambient temperature. Again, temperature is the big thing with DC fast charging. So why did I decide to drive this car? 2 slides again. Sorry about that. So why did I decide to drive this car 2,800 miles, averaging about 100 miles between stops? Mostly because I've had bad experiences with auto transport companies, and the good ones are really expensive. Partly because I like a good challenge, and everyone says a trip like this isn't possible. So this is the route I took. Using a better route planner, I planned out multiple ways to get this done. Unfortunately, I couldn't go through Canada. That would have made the trip quite a bit shorter, and there are many good fast chargers up in this region. You can see a better route planner has these 2 legs of the trip in amber. That means that they are recommending I reduce my speed to be able to make this trip. So a better route planner takes into account the vehicle you have, the range of that vehicle, the efficiency of that vehicle, and these are all metrics that you can change manually if you know exactly what your efficiency will be based on a atypical load in the car, you have a bunch of people in it, you need to change that figure. A better route planner will let you do that. It then takes and plans the charging stops for you. It also accounts for elevation, real-time temperature if you wish, and recommends a maximum speed limit for each leg if it's required to be dropped from the actual posted speed limit. I found that a better route planner was pretty conservative with the i3. The BMW does not allow for remote access to the real-time consumption figures, and a better route planner has to kind of make a guess there. Other vehicles and other manufacturers, a better route planner can look at your real-time consumption figures and change this route or recommend skipping a stop or adding a stop as needed based on what your actual range will be. Next, I use PlugShare. I took PlugShare and I would cross-check those charging stops that a better route planner recommended to make sure that they were real locations, that they were still good and still viable. PlugShare is an app that, again, you put in your vehicle's details, you pick out and recommend, you can pick out and filter which plugs you want to use and look for, and it will show you what's in your area. So anything in amber is going to be a DC fast charger. Anything in green like this is going to be a level 2 charger. You can also see that you get ratings for that station. How effective is that station? Are other users that have checked in with this charging successfully on it? Is it still good? Is it broken? Lots of really good data in PlugShare in real time. This is an invaluable tool for anyone who's got an EV, especially a shorter range one, or someone who's planning, even if you have a long range one and you're planning to take a long trip and exceed that range of your daily allowable or maximum range of that car. PlugShare is really going to help you figure out where you can charge, how you can charge, how long it's going to take. It even goes so far as to allow you to pay inside the app so that you don't have to use and download another app, have another username and password, put your credit card into another system. PlugShare will let you pay for that. The Gateway Center in downtown Port Angeles is an example of that, where you can pay straight in this app. So after running a whole bunch of trips and a better route planner, triple checking the stops that were viable, chargers in service, I took off. This is my first night in Tipton, Iowa. I camped my way across the country to save money, partly because I really enjoy camping, and partly because most campsites have RV plugs. So this is a great spot that you can stop for the night and leave in the morning with a full charger, with a fully charged battery. I took along with me my level 2 charger from my garage, several adapters to make sure that I could plug it into just about any plug I came into. And I also took something called a Tesla tap. Now the Tesla tap takes and converts the Tesla plug to the J1772. It does not work for DC fast charging. It's only for level 2 AC charging, but it opens up a whole bunch of extra spots that I could stop and get fuel if I needed to. Many hotels have destination chargers, wineries, movie theaters, all sorts of places have Tesla destination chargers. Do make sure you check with the owner of that charger before you charge a non-Tesla on it. A lot of this equipment is provided free of charge by Tesla for Teslas. And again, it will depend on the owner and who's paying for the electricity as to whether or not they're amenable to non-Teslas using this equipment. It's just good to be courteous. I've never had a problem with it. I used it on this trip. I'll talk about that later. So this was my typical first stop of the day. Again, temperature of the battery is a big factor with DC fast charging. So these first stops would typically be 40 to 50 minutes. And there's plenty of time to make a cup of coffee and get geared up for the day. Once on the road, I would make sure I put the destination into the BMW app, into the BMW navigation system in the car, rather. This allowed me to have that real-time feedback of my consumption and my real-time efficiency data that I could cross-check it with the Better Route Planner's trip leg and make sure I was actually going to make it as recommended or as expected. Oftentimes, I would beat a Better Route Planner by 5 to 10%, and I very quickly get comfortable running this car right down to 5% or less on the battery, which is ideal for fast charging. This was actually a dual EV trip. I bought a one wheel for this trip and learned how to ride it on it. And I found that very invaluable for that last mile or last 1,000 yards to and from across the Walmart parking lots, up to get lunch. And it allowed me to stretch my legs, have a better variety in where I stopped, what I ate, where I went to, and get back to the car in time for it to be done charging. That's a key aspect with EV road tripping, is only stay at the charger as long as you need to make it to the next one. Once the DC current drops off or tapers like we looked at in those graphs, you want to get back on the move and head to the next stop. In general, the lower the state of charge you pull into the charger with, the faster the charge will be. So it may seem counterintuitive, but you don't actually want to charge the car to full each time. You're far better off leapfrogging from charger to charger and staying on the high-speed part of your car's charging curve. For a car like the Bolt, you'll want to try and stay below 60% and just stop every 100 miles, just like the i3. With the i3, I found myself charging up above 90% almost every stop with very good speeds. Here's a screenshot of the My BMW app. This gives you an idea of a typical trip or a typical leg. I was able to get 118 miles on this one, 4.1 miles per kilowatt hour, and I averaged 4.5 on the efficiency. I did do this trip in the middle of the heat dome, so I saw temperatures well above 90 degrees most of the time. I believe this mileage would be a little bit higher on average if I didn't have to run as much air conditioning. I was able to do highway speeds for almost all the legs. I can only think of one or two where I had to drop down my speed to be able to make it, and mostly in rural America where the chargers are not as ubiquitous. So this was in Utah on day 3. This was the day I almost didn't make my planned stop. I neglected to account for a 30-mile-an-hour headwind, and it was a planned leg of 110 miles. So I was already stretching it, and then again, didn't account for the weather. So this is where the Tesla tap really bailed me out. I was able to stop at a Holiday Inn Express and use their Tesla destination charger for about 40 minutes. Rode the one wheel to my heart's content, and then moved on to my next charging stop. This was night 3 in Snowville, Utah. There's nothing in this town. It's got one yellow flashing streetlight, and I found myself looking for stuff to do every night of this trip. So that's why that really rang true with me, that there was nothing in this town. I found myself just so much less fatigued driving this car 6-8 hours a day. And I don't know if that was partly because I got out every day, or partly because I got out every couple hours, or if it was more because of how quiet the cabin was. Either way, I must have made about 50 laps of this campground on the one wheel. I rode that thing until it was dead itself, charged up both EVs, and then hit the road in the morning. So this is the full DC charge history for the trip. You can see it was 28 fast chargers and 4 overnight level 2 chargers not shown. This car was a champ. It pulled 45 kilowatts at almost every charging session, and I found Electrify America to be the easier and simpler networks to use on this trip. It wouldn't have been possible without this network, and even a few years ago with their network, I don't think it would have been done. So they've been adding enough stations that makes a long-range trip with a short-range vehicle very feasible. At the bottom, you'll see a comparison here between what it costs me in DC fast charging and what it would have cost me to drive my TDI Volkswagen. It's about $5 in the difference, and you can see it took me around the same time. I took about extra half a day to do this trip than it took us to do the same trip without going through Utah, going straight across I-90 a few weeks later with the regular cars and the rest of our household goods. So a long-range trip like this, even in a short-range EV, is very possible as long as there are chargers along your route. So you can see by the gray sky here that we made it to Port Angeles. And this is the EI station here in town. It just so happened that I made it to town this first day that this location was in service. It's kind of a cool coincidence, and I'm very happy to have it in town. So thank you all for your time. This is my first time giving a talk in this format, and I hope you all learned something. I look forward to answering any questions you have. Back to you, Rachel. All right, good question from Gail about the chart from Engineering Explained. Let me look back through the slides here and see if I can bring it up. Maybe. Here we go. I'm working on it. Hang on. All right, here it comes to life. All right, so mileage per year on this, I'm not sure if I maybe neglected to say it, but the mileage per year is the national average, so 13,500. You have a Tesla 3 with the 2 batteries. How would you read this chart? I'm not sure what you mean by the 2 batteries. The Teslas have several different batteries that they can have up to 100 kilowatt hours. Assuming that you have the long range Model 3, which I believe is a 100 kilowatt hour pack, you would be in this chart here, this range of it over here. So there's 3.6 years to offset the extra carbon emissions from the battery production. So that's how this chart reads. So it's emissions here, how high the emissions are for an ICE car, vehicle production here, 2 years worth of driving, again, with the national average for miles per gallon and miles driven. And 6 years, again, because a regular car continues to emit emissions as long as you drive it, this continues to go up for as long as you own it and as long as you drive it. Whereas an EV, you have only the emissions from the grid that you're using to charge the battery with, and then from its production. Nothing comes out of the tailpipe. So that's how this chart is read. And hopefully that answers your question, Gail. Did you have any other questions? That battery size is on the bottom here. Anything else that came up in the questions and answers, Rachel?
No.
Not sure if we're having problems with the questions and answers. I got one here from Sybil Kramer. Hi, Sean. Thanks for the great presentation. Did you say you got an adapter for the BMW that allowed you to charge at a Tesla EVSE? Yes, I did. It's called the Tesla Tap. There are a few options out there that make those now. There's Tesla Tap. There's, I believe, Electron makes one. It is a J1772 to Tesla charger. So any of the Tesla, again, the Tesla destination chargers are what you can use that on, not the superchargers. But a quick Google search for Tesla Tap should get you in the right neighborhood to find that adapter. Anonymous attendee asks, what charging apps for paying do you use the most? Charging apps, that's certainly one of the things that needs to get sorted out. And I think that will happen as we get more and more adopters to switch to EV and start using these apps and start interacting with these charging stations on the regular. Currently, I have ChargePoint. That's my home charger. I did that mostly so that I could aggregate my usage data and what I'm spending public and also at my home, and have that just in a one-stop shopping area. ChargePoint's one I definitely use. Electrify America is my go-to for DC fast charging stuff. Anything that's going to be a longer trip, I use that Electrify America, especially with the Pass Plus membership, where you can pay down the rate. That definitely pays for itself. I know there's been a lot of vocal people online that have had issues with that equipment and with using Electrify America. We did not experience any of that. You saw I just had 34 charging sessions on this trip this past summer, and I had exactly 0 issues with Electrify America. 27 or 28 of those charging sessions were with Electrify America. So I think it might depend on the vehicle you have. Your mileage may vary, but for me, Electrify America is the one I started before.
Yeah, I can hear the audio, but I can't.
We can hear you now, Rachel.
You can help Sean get the questions.
In Washington, so anonymous attendee again asking, I'm not sure if it's the same one, but in Washington, we pay in lieu of gas tax for an EV equivalent, and that is on our registration. It's a flat fee. Anything we can do to make this more fair? Great question. That's going to come down to your.
Unable to, like.
That's going to come down to your local legislators.
I was supposed to be reading questions to him, which he can do, but I can't unmute and I can't. Like,
you are unmuted, Rachel.
Or anything.
So in Washington, we have a flat fee that's on the registration. Rhode Island's doing the same. Michigan has one as well. And I don't know what to do as far as to make that more fair. I agree, if you don't drive the average, or your regular hybrid or gas car gets really great gas mileage, then you could be paying more in fuel tax or excise tax or road tax, however they want to word it, than you would be in a normal car. Unfortunately, there's not much that we can do at the user end aside from contacting your representatives, contacting your lawmakers, and voicing these concerns that there could or should be a better way, and that you feel you're paying more than your fair share for road tax. Unfortunately, the roads are not free to maintain or build, so at some point, that has to happen. Tony Valera mentions that usage-based EV road taxes would be better. I agree. There's obviously some issues on how to do that, whether it's a mileage check once per year that's tied in with a vehicle inspection that exists already in some states. That's not something we have in Washington, so it will be interesting to see what that would look like here in a place that does not have vehicle inspections. My average cost per charge on the road trip, I didn't actually run the average in that spreadsheet. I had charged as the high figure was $9.20 at a construction building site in Michigan that was very expensive. And the cheapest was $2.90 something in the middle of, was that Nebraska? I forget exactly where. That was the station that was charging by the minute because it was a state that cannot charge or retail or resell electricity. So there's a lot at play here as EVs become more and more mainstream. Some of these things will change. Tony's absolutely right. He says it will evolve, and so will the cost per charging. At home, between $2 and $3 in Michigan. Actually, between houses here in Washington State, so I don't have good data on how much the typical charge would be here in Port Angeles. But on average in Michigan, it was, which we were paying 12 cents per kilowatt hour, was between $3 and $4 per charge and about $25 to $30 a month. Obviously, those figures will change a lot depending on how much you drive and how far you drive. 9 cents a kilowatt hour is what Tony's saying. Thank you for that. So even less than what I was dealing with in Michigan. Diane has a question. What do you think about the news that Ford is creating 11,000 new jobs specifically for building EV cars? I think it's great. I think if the big three and the auto manufacturers are going to continue to be called the big three, they're going to have to continue to sell the things that we want. There's no other way around that. It's going to be up to the market. So that's up to us. What we buy is what they're going to build. That's been proven. Good luck buying a small hatchback or even a sedan anymore. There's Chevy, GM doesn't build the Cruze or any of the four-door sedans that we know and think of as sedans. The market shifted entirely to trucks, crossovers, small SUVs. So I think that same kind of market change can be driven towards EVs or away from them, depending on what we buy. So Tony's done some quick math for me here. He's saying 3 to 4 cents per mile here in Washington if you're charging at home exclusively with your EV, and that is great. I look forward to that. If you have other questions, throw them in the chat or in the questions and answer section. I'm seeing a gap here in what people want to know about. Looks like we've had a little bit of internet issues with the host. So yes, the base rate, of course, Tony. Can't have you tied into the grid for nothing. So got to get that where we can, right? Betsy Delaris has a question. Is there potential for adaptability to solar in these vehicles in the future? Great question. So I alluded to that a little bit with my format war joke with the Chatimo. The Chatimo protocol or charging protocol has into it Chatimo protocol has built into it the ability to charge from the car to the grid. And that's one of the key benefits or one of the differences between Chatimo and J1772, which is the US SAE standard. Vehicle to grid is a great idea, and it's a great thing, and that also enables that solar aspect of it, where you can charge directly from the solar panel to the car. In the EU and in the UK, there are chargers on the market that automatically or already will take your PV electrical generation on site and divert that directly to the car without integrating it into the grid. To my knowledge, there's not a charger that is UL listed or built and sold in the US that does that. I would love to see that become mainstream. I think that Ford probably has the closest thing with that, with their intent to have vehicle to grid built into the Ford Lightning. Dan asks, what websites did I use for planning my trip? I went over that. The Better Route Planner and PlugShare were the two websites that I primarily used for this trip. I did occasionally check with the native charging network sites for certain locations, especially if PlugShare said that they did not have a good rating or that there were some recent charging failures with my particular car. I would double check on, let's see, Green Lots was one of the only other ones that I used just to make sure that the charger was online. Hope that answers your question. All right, last call for questions. And sorry, I'm talking to the host here offline. We had some internet issues out here in the Great Beyond. So last call for questions. And also want to remind you that Rachel will be sending out an email with the last call for questions. All right, so Rachel's going to be sending out an email, like I said, with some of the links and some of the resources that I reference in this, as well as a large data dump from the Drive Electric Week national effort there. I'm screwing up the name on that one, but you know what I'm talking about. And your earlier mileage I get on a charge with my car. So with the i3, it's between 120 and 130 miles in average ambient temperatures. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we are very fortunate that we don't get super cold or super hot. Back in Michigan, where it's very much the Arctic tundra, feels like Hoth on most days in winter, I would get about 80 to 90 miles at highway speed. So the mileage you get with your car, once again, the loosen up behind the steering wheel, us, the driver, has the biggest impact on what mileage you'll get with your car. And so your mileage may vary, but like I said, my i3 is the medium battery. The larger batteries, the 120 amps, which were 2019 and up, get an EPA rated 153 miles. My car is EPA rated at 124, I believe, somewhere in there. But I see those numbers routinely. BMW's been very good about nailing those EPA estimates. All right, Linty, I'm not sure if I can actually end this, but I don't see any other questions unless you have anything on your end that we're missing.
I don't believe so. I think you did a great job. Thank you so much, Sean. Very sorry. I think Rachel's she's still there, but she's trapped in the internet somewhere. But she will be sending out additional information at the conclusion of the session, as well as I believe this session's been recorded, so it will also be available for viewing for other folks if they wish to share it.
Awesome. All right. Thank you all for the opportunity, and hopefully we'll see you on the friendly roads.
Thanks, everybody.